And so I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. So today I am going to talk to you about teaching critical AI literacies. There's a lot of different dimensions to what I'm going to be saying. And you can feel free to tweet or post on social media what I'm talking about. I'm at Bali Maha, Bali_Maha on Twitter, and the slides are Creative Commons non-commercial, so you can reuse them if you want. I'm going to give you the links to them in a minute, just as long as you attribute them to me. And before I start, I wanted to do my version of a land acknowledgement. I don't live in a country where we do land acknowledgements. So instead, I want to talk about coloniality and remind us that coloniality survives colonialism and it's still alive in our books and in academic performance criteria, cultural patterns, common sense, self-image of peoples, aspirations of self, and so many other aspects of modern experience. And in a way, as modern subjects, we breathe coloniality all the time and every day. And actually, AI is doing that too. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But before I get going, this is going to be an interactive presentation. I'm going to do a lot of Mentimeter. I have some folks here virtually, and I know there are people in the room, so Mentimeter will capture the voices of everyone who's willing to participate. So I always start and say, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, and how are you feeling today? So I'm going to show you the Mentimeter, and if you have a phone that can read the QR code, you can do that, but I am also going to give you a number that you can use. So you can either go to menti.com and the code is 45110713. So that's on a browser. Go to menti.com and just 45110713. Or you could use the QR code at the bottom here from your phone, from your QR reader. And for the privileged folks on Zoom, I can actually just send you the link in the chat. So that might be a little bit easier. All right, so I'm going to keep showing the QR code. I'm going to move on to the first question, and the QR code is still here, so you can see it. So how are you feeling? This should produce a word cloud. Okay, so we have excited. It's totally okay to be feeling multiple things, by the way. Curious, happy, thirsty. Give them some water or something. Don't you have water there? I have my bottle of water. I have my coffee. If you're not in the session and you're virtual, please go get whatever you need to keep you focused, like food, drink, whatever. I always have something to drink next to me. Groggy, restless, overwhelmed, curious, and excited. It's the end of my semester and I haven't submitted my grading yet, so I get that. Restlessness and overwhelm. Someone's feeling tentative. There's happy. There's sad. There's cute. I don't know how it means to feel cute, but that's interesting. Calm, energetic, distracted, enthusiastic, interested, sleepy. Yeah, I always get sleepy in my class because I teach at 8:30 a.m. So they're always sleepy, but they manage to wake up by the end of the day. So I think curious is the biggest one. We have excited and interested and energized and engaged and tired, understandably. Supported, which is lovely. I'm glad to hear this. Scattered, stuck. Great. Some people are saying they're great, and some people are saying they're stuck. Some people are feeling creative. All right. Thank you all so much. So I'm going to keep asking you some questions if that's okay. And this next question, oh, the instructions again. We don't need those yet. All right. What is your level of familiarity with generative AI, like ChatGPT? So obviously this has been changing over time, but I still find people who've never used it. So what I'm seeing right here is continues to be what I see. So we have people who are beginners, people who've never used it, and intermediate users, people who know it and understand it well, but they don't teach it or research it. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. And if you'll notice, I haven't called anyone an expert on it because you can be teaching it and researching it and still something new comes up and you don't know what's going on there. So I'm always about like, I teach and research it, but I don't necessarily call myself an expert on it. I do think about it a lot. I talk about it a lot. I give workshops on it. But I learn from my students when I teach it, and I learn from people in other disciplines the way they use it. Right, so we're pretty distributed, but we have 10 people who teach and research it here. So I hope you'll all be learning from each other. And we have 7 people who know it and understand it pretty well. So I'm hoping everybody will be learning from each other. And I think it's useful in these spaces. When someone is first being exposed to it, they may see it from a perspective that's different from those of us who are immersed, who've been immersed in it for a year or more. My undergraduate thesis was a neural network, so I understand how generative AI in general works, like on an abstract level. But then I did a PhD in education and didn't do any coding for like 20 years. So, but here I am now talking about AI again. Okay, thank you to everyone who shared here. And then my next question, unrelated to AI specifically, but what's something important you've learned this week already? My week starts on a Sunday because our weekend is Friday, Saturday, but I know your week just started. What's something important you've learned this week already? Don't feel pressured to answer this one, but if you have something in mind, I'd love to hear it. Oh, this is still the how you're feeling. I don't know why I got that, but anyway. Group option or account in ChatGPT. Yeah, I just heard about this like 3 days ago. Like GPT Teams, right? It's called ChatGPT Teams. Ah, and the Scarlett Johansson voice. That's something that people are talking about a lot, like from yesterday to today. So these are definitely things you just learned this week, I think, because it just came out, right? GPTs are now available to free users. Yeah, to free for users. Well, were they? I don't know what you mean by that, because weren't some of them always available? You have an amazing community of practitioners at CU. Yeah, that's amazing. I was just telling JC right now that I was looking up an article on Brave Spaces and I came across someone called Brad McLean who works at CU Boulder. I'm like, do you know this person? And this was just like half an hour ago that I found an article by him. I don't know if any of you guys know him. Someone saying the importance of trying. Trying looks different for everyone and can change from day to day. I agree. Trying is so important. Confusion is the first step of learning. I love that. Suno.com, you can make AI songs. Oh, I'm going to check that one out. Thank you. AI doesn't generate human hands. It's really bad at human hands. Yeah, most of them are bad at human hands. I mean, I don't always notice it, but sometimes they have 6 fingers and stuff. I learned more about how to build a GPT. Awesome. I'm still learning. I still want to learn that. That you can use generative AI to help write incorrect test question option. That's a good point. That's a good use of it. We'll be very good at that. My patience with my mother's wearing thin, I need to consider my approaches to bettering our relationship. I hear you completely. It's a difficult place to be when trying to care for our elderly parents. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I am going to switch over to my slides, and I want to give you the link to the slides. So I'm going to put the link in the chat for people who are virtually with me, and I'm going to put a different QR code. We're going to have to go back and forth between QR codes just for this one time. This is the QR code for my slides. So for those of you who are in the room who would like to follow along, the slides should have alternative text on almost all of the images, and you can put comments on the slides for me later. So even if you want to talk to me about something and we don't have a chance today, you can always send me later. We are going to go back and use the QR code for Mentimeter again in a minute, but I'll post that QR code again in case you've lost it when you were bringing this one up. All right, so what to expect today is a lot of interaction. On Zoom, I would do it with a chatter fall, but because some of you are in the room, we're using Mentimeter. We're going to talk about metaphors, and then we're going to talk about my approach to critical AI literacy and thinking about teaching about and with AI and resources, and then I'd love to hear about your takeaways. So it's really important, I think, to just set the frame with this quote by Ben Williamson, who's someone who's been writing about this for a really long time, and I respect his work a lot. And he's saying that AI cannot be considered inevitable, beneficial, or transformative in any straightforward way. And think about all the articles you've read that do try to convince you that. And you don't need to take a strongly normative perspective either way to say that AI in education is highly contested and controversial. So in other words, it's a public problem that requires public deliberation and ongoing oversight if any possible benefits are to be realized. And more importantly, I think the substantial risks have to be addressed. So I think it's always important in these conversations. There's always people who are very excited about AI and people who are worried about AI. So I'm going to switch back over to this. where I'm asking, how do you feel about the latest advances in generative AI? So I showed that quote sort of to make sure you feel like you have permission to say all these different things that you may be feeling. Playing catch up. Yeah, I understand that. Excited, confused, unsure, concerned, curious, intrigued, excited, thrilled, nervous, skeptical, tentative, hard to keep up with, fascinated, apprehensive, creepy. Yeah, it's a little bit creepy. Mixed feelings, definitely. I've had mixed feelings from the very beginning of this. Like, I'm excited and curious and interested, and I'm still worried, um, and I think everybody's playing catch up all the time, honestly. Some people are hopeful, some are weary. I can understand that too. We have skeptical, we have very skeptical. We have uncertainty, we have potential. That's always good to see potential though, as well, I think. Hope and potential as well. But the big ones are concerned, curious, and excited. But there's also the worried and the nervous, which are not small either. And we should always keep that in mind. And whenever my department sends out emails about AI, we're always, trying to make sure that it doesn't scare people who are already worried, and we don't want to overexcite people who are already quite excited to go all the other way. And I'll explain one of these in a minute. One example of these like later on today. But there's cautious and there's opportunities. Thank you all for sharing. Okay, back to here. So I've already asked you these questions. And so when I say critical AI literacy, I just wanted to share what I generally mean by this, because sometimes people have different meanings when they say critical. My PhD was about critical thinking, so I know there are many meanings for this. But what I mean is, first of all, seeing AI not as a neutral technology, but seeing that it's a political technology and it can serve the policy objectives and ideologies of particular people. And when I say critical, I mean social justice oriented, as in like critical pedagogy and Paulo Freire. Yeah. And to remind us that, AI is basically a reflection of who we have let have a voice in the past, and that voice was built from and still has large contributions from systems of hierarchy that use academia to further justify their positionality of power and stratification. So AI reproduces the power of the powerful. So for me to take a critical approach to AI, I mainly talk about critical AI literacy, and I think when we talk about what we mean by critical AI literacy, it's still kind of contextual, like who are the learners, who are the teachers, where are we located? Like think about what else that might mean. But what I'm going to say is I always tell people, yes, you're teaching a freshman course. It's a rhetoric and composition course where writing is what you're teaching, is a very different context than you're teaching a senior course in mechanical engineering or in history, right? And each of these will have a very different context. And the teacher's own familiarity with AI makes a difference. But I also want to share this quote that has nothing to do with AI whatsoever. And that's about the purpose of writing. And it's a quote from Hamza Yusuf's book, Purification of the Heart. And he said, "The heart is centered slightly to the left of our bodies. Two sacred languages of Arabic and Hebrew are written from right to left toward the heart, which, as some have noted, mirrors the purpose of writing, namely to affect the heart." Now, I don't think writing an email is meant to affect the heart, but a lot of other types of writing are. And those are the kinds of writing that I hope people won't resort to using AI for. But there's a lot of other writing that isn't meant to affect the heart that maybe AI can be useful for, it can save time for. But definitely we should like leave some room for the things that affect the heart to be coming from the heart and not from a machine. And I think we should follow Adrienne Marie Brown's concept of intentional adaptation. Something new is happening around us. We don't want to give knee-jerk reactions, neither to this shock of generative AI nor to the shock of like the pandemic. We need to remember like what's our broader goal, what's our larger goal, our long-term goal that we're working towards, and how do we adapt right now in order to keep moving in the right direction. So now I want to ask you what kind of a metaphor you would use for AI. So I'm going to go back to Mentimeter again. And I'm going to show here's the QR code again, if that helps you. The first metaphor for AI that happened in my life was from my mother, who is a medical doctor and has nothing to do with AI or teaching. She said it reminds her of fast food, which I thought was such a good metaphor, right? Something that a lot of people end up using because they don't have time, and it satisfies a lot of people, but doing a lot of it is not good for you. So I'm seeing roller coaster, assistant, thought partner, stochastic parrot. I'm going to take a screenshot of this later so that you can have them on the slides if you go back to them later. Swimming. Oh, that's interesting. Lazy. The person or the AI tool? Mysterious stranger. I think the more you use AI with voice, the more it starts to feel human. Nuclear weapons. Whoa. Search engine. Assistive tech. Yeah, I think assistive tech is one of the most impressive uses of AI, honestly. Automatic translator. That's another impressive but problematic use of AI. I'm seeing Frankenstein. Alien from Arrival. Dumb waiter. Wikipedia. It's not like Wikipedia, though. Wikipedia at least has references. um, genius, helpful, calculator. It's also not like a calculator. Calculators are almost always right. Bratty little sibling. I like that one. That's new. Shadow of reality. That's very interesting. And noise is also very interesting. Ominous shadow. Really nice. Okay, research. And the assistant one is growing bigger. Echo chamber is there. That's an interesting one as well. Colonize loudspeaker. Oh, colonizing loudspeaker. That's ours. Someone has read our paper. That's coming up in a minute. Thank you for reflecting that back to me. I'm seeing a simulator somewhere, I think, but it just changed. Yeah, here it is. Fire hose. Yeah, feels a bit like that as well. Thank you all so much for engaging. I'm really enjoying what you're writing here so far. All right, I'm finding it harder to find the new ones. I know there's one that just collective mind. I think that's the new one. Okay, let me add these over here. So I'm just gonna make a new slide and just put this here so that you can have it later. And I can send JC the rest of the whole PDF of all the results that we get from talking today. And so, yes, the metaphor idea, we ran away with the metaphor idea. And we wrote this paper called Assistant Parrot or Colonizing Loudspeaker, ChatGPT Metaphors for Developing Critical AI Literacies. I wrote it with a couple of folks from the US and an undergraduate blind student at my university. And this picture is made with DALL-E, right? Because I'm not going to go and create an image of a loudspeaker and and a parrot and an assistant. I can get that from DALL-E for sure with AI. So we asked a lot of questions like what feelings do metaphors of AI evoke? Do they help us understand AI? What kind of perspective does it push us to imagine about AI? Is the metaphor helpful or harmful? Is it generally positive or negative as a view of AI? How does it showcase accessibility or equity issues? And how does the metaphor portray the relationship between humans and AI? And then we focused especially on, is it anthropomorphizing or not? And we talked about Selber's multiliteracy. So is it anthropomorphizing, this word that I learned last year? And I don't know if people were using it before, but just means, does it make AI seem like a human or not? And then Selber's multiliteracies were functional, critical, and rhetorical. So functional is mostly positive, critical is mostly negative, and rhetorical is sort of seeing both sides. And so we created this matrix like a chart, and then you could plot it, right? And so here are the ones we did. We had genie and magician as like sort of human, but not really fully human. And rhetorical, because a genie can be good or bad. A magician in our culture and Islam, relatively bad. There's like the black magic type of thing. But magicians can be seen as like fun and good and helpful, I guess, or impressive at least. But like an assistant is a helpful human metaphor, right? You're saying it's helpful. And a lot of you mentioned that one. Pahlawi is an Egyptian word for like a bullshitter. So someone who will tell you the answer even if they don't know it. That's what a Pahlawi is. So that's a critical view, but it still sees it as a human. Calculator or autocomplete are functional views, like positive, like it does the job. It's a non-human metaphor. Stochastic parrot is a critical one. I saw one of you mention that. And it's semi-human because parrots are at least living things, right? They're not machines. And two-edged sword is a non-human metaphor, right? And it's rhetorical. It sees multiple sides of the story. And then fast food, plastic surgery, colonizing loudspeaker, which I was very happy to see one of you mentioned, are critical views of AI, right? Like the AI is problematic that it does those things. So if we go back to the ones that you all said, there are ones that say genius. So those are very, very positive, right? Mysterious stranger is like, stranger could be scary. Frankenstein, I'm thinking, is more on the scary side, like not very happy. Alien from Arrival, and like aliens, you can be curious about them or scared of them. So I like the ones that I can't even tell if it means you're scared of it or happy with it. Nuclear weapons, definitely not not a positive one, right? Bratty little sibling. I think that's the cute one because it also, like, you love your siblings, but you're annoyed by them. So I think it's a middle metaphor, right? When I'm in class with my students, I let them work on this on the board and place their metaphors along these axes, and it becomes an interesting discussion because I had magician all over the place. People put it in different places, so we don't always mean the same thing or have the same connotation, even though we might use the same word. So I think it's useful to hear how people think about AI. What does AI remind them of to kind of get an idea of their attitudes and their beliefs about its power, I think, as well. Another sort of metaphorical way of thinking about AI that I've found useful in discussions with students and with educators, and I hope you find it useful too, is to think about cake. And this one came out of a discussion with one of my cousins who works in HR, and she was worried about graduates coming without skills because of what they are doing with AI. And I told her, like, imagine this as baking cake. And I've written about this in a book chapter, which is in the slides, and you can access that later. But I'll just explain it real quick and see what you guys think. So if we're baking cakes in class, is it important to bake the cake from scratch? If you're the one who's baking the cake from scratch, then your students need to bake the cake from scratch. Or are you teaching them decoration? So you know the show Nailed It on Netflix? So that's a show where they're talking about decoration and they give them the cake mix in a box and then they can add a few things to it, but they don't have to do everything from scratch because they need to focus on the decoration. So if you're teaching a first year language course, then maybe you need to the students need to bake a cake from scratch. But if they're like graduate students or they're senior students in something and they're learning how to decorate cakes, they don't need to learn, you don't need to, you can give them a cake mix just to speed things up sometimes. You're not assessing them on the original cake mix, you're assessing them on the looks of the cake. When is it okay to buy a cake from a bakery? Now, if we say buy a cake from a bakery and we make that analogy to education, it sounds like we're talking about, yeah, and you're buying a paper from a paper mill or something, right? Having someone else do it. But think about, do we ask our students to do things that we haven't equipped them to do independently? Or does everyone even bake? Like, not everyone bakes. So if we ask our students to bake and we haven't taught them how to bake, then some of them will resort to that. But then there's another angle on this. What if what we're teaching is about event planning and they're planning a wedding? They don't have to bake the cake themselves. They can get the cake from somewhere else because they're focusing on the wedding planning, which is a higher order um, thing that includes a lot of different things, and they can contract out parts of it. And so sometimes, like my boss, she does design thinking workshops, and sometimes she'll let AI come up with the personas for her. AI is not going to give the workshop, but it can give her little bits and pieces and save her time so she can focus on the other things that AI can't do. The last one here is a Twinkie. And I think if what we want from students is a Twinkie, they're all going to produce the same vanilla type of paper, then maybe we need to rethink the assessments that we're offering students if they keep giving us this. Because I think a lot of at least ChatGPT 3.5 produces as vanilla. The ChatGPT 4.0 is really impressive at the moment, but I'm sure I'm going to break it at some point and discover its limitations. But because it's new, it's looking really impressive compared to what came before. But I think the thing that I'm asking everyone to think about is what's your learning outcome? What is the core thing that your course is teaching? And then how can you make sure your students are focusing on that and not using AI for the core thing? But then is it okay if then students use AI for the other things that are not core to your course? So we'll talk about this a little bit more. I don't have an interactive slide for it, but we can talk about it towards the end as well if we have time. So I've seen this before. I don't know if any of you have seen it. I like the green, yellow, red thing. So Ryan Watkins is suggesting like you could use something like this on your syllabus. Permitted uses of AI, and you list them like idea development, organizing teams, and make that in green so that they know that's a green light. And then have things that are in red that they're not permitted to use AI for, like comparative analysis or drafting sections. And then have a yellow use where it would require permission from you, like constructing an outline, drafting a summary, all other kinds of uses. And so I think that can be helpful for students to know for every assignment or for your entire course, if that applies, like where is AI allowed and where is it not allowed. I actually do it by assignment because some of the assignments, I don't want them to use AI, and other assignments I'm like, you do whatever makes sense to you. And so so this is one thing I recommend to faculty, but what I do in my actual class is what I call compassionate learning design. I mean, this is something, a model I've developed with Nicola Pallet and Daniela Gashaga from South Africa, and it builds on work related to Indigenous evaluation. And the idea of it is coming in a second, and it's this. You can decide what is right and give it to your students and say, this is what you need to do. Or you can offer them a couple of options. You give it and you do it for them, but you just let them choose. So you can let them choose a couple of things, but you give them the criteria. Or you can co-design your learning, your AI guidelines with students. Or you can let students decide for themselves. And these are the different levels of doing it. And I tend to just tell students, you're doing this for the next couple of weeks as your project or part of a project. See if AI is going to help you or not. And actually, different students who are doing different topics will discover that AI can or cannot help them depending on how specialized the topic is, how knowledgeable they are about it, how passionate they are, and how good of a writer they are to begin with. My students are non-native speakers, so some of them are just better writers than others. They've been learning English for a longer time and so on. I've also co-written a blog post with a former student of mine who's also a co-author on that metaphor paper. I'm going to put that one in the chat. It's just a blog post that we wrote together. And we were talking about the reasons that students would use AI in unauthorized ways, but it's not just AI, right? Like any shortcut. And we always have to ask ourselves, did we give students enough time to do this assignment? Did we give them sufficient support so they wouldn't need to seek support that we didn't authorize? Did we make sure that they had enough confidence that they could do this on their own? Because I think, especially with non-native speakers, and I don't know if you have a lot of those at CU Boulder, but with non-native speakers, they are so impressed by the eloquence and the grammatical correctness of ChatGPT, and they're still not very knowledgeable about what they're doing. So they just get impressed by it and they think it's going to save them time. And they don't realize that they've lost out on the learning because they were supposed to be making cake, you know? All right. So now I've been talking for a while. I'll stop soon and listen to you guys. But this is my model of critical AI literacy. And I think the key thing is if we as educators and our students are developing this critical AI literacy, we'll get better at using it appropriately. So first, people need to understand how it works. And I'll show you the kinds of things I do for each of these things. I think people need to understand how it works. Now, of course, if you're teaching a computer science course, you can go pretty deep. If you're teaching history, I think you can do like a very basics, or you can just send them a video to watch on their own. And I'll give you some examples now. I think it's very important pretty early on to recognize inequalities and biases in AI and to, based on that, make a lot of decisions of when not to use it. We need to examine some of the ethical issues and also, know what we're getting ourselves into when we use it. I think it's difficult to say people will stop using AI because of the biases or the ethical issues. So knowing that people will be using AI, possibly, not in the sense that it's inevitable, but at least definitely students are using it. And some workplaces are. So people need to know how to craft effective prompts to get the best out of AI so that they can know the limitations of it and get the best possible outcome. If you're going to use it, then you might as well use it well. And then assessing appropriate use. And this is about figuring out where AI might help you and where AI might lead you astray. And I just recently peer reviewed a paper. I wish I could link to it, but it's not published yet. But it was talking about how not just with AI, but with any form of automation, actually, and then ChatGPT has been the same. At the beginning, it doesn't really help productivity because you have to keep correcting the mistakes it makes, and you still don't know what it does well and what it doesn't do well. And then people were saying, as coders, when they get code out of ChatGPT, they don't know why it created it that way, and they can't interrogate it, like, why did you do it like that? And so they spend so much time fixing what the AI did that maybe if they'd done it without AI, it could have saved them time. But there are ways to make the interface better and to make a tool better. And for us as humans to better judge when to use it and when not to use it. And I'll share some of that in a minute as well. So I don't know if you guys know about the AI pedagogy project. I'm on their advisory board. And what I like is there's a lot of spaces online that have a lot of AI stuff. But this is a curated one, so it doesn't have millions of things, right? So to learn how generative AI works, they have an AI starter and an LLM tutorial where someone who doesn't want to create an account on ChatGPT or any other software can just use it to see what AI looks like when it works, what generative AI, I mean. And then awareness of inequalities and biases. I think historically AI has had these issues, but with generative AI especially, You can do a critical analysis across AI tools and stereotypes. And one of my students did this semester. And when he asked DALI, or I can't remember, three different visual AIs to produce a picture of an Egyptian person going to work, they produced like ancient Egyptians going to work. So it was, but carrying a laptop bag, which was kind of ridiculous. Ethical issues. So you can have debates in your class about the ethics of generative AI, or you can have students read the terms of service of these kinds of tools and find out what they're doing with their data. There's also obviously ethical issues related to climate. There's ethical issues related to labor, exploitation of labor in Kenya. The people who have filtered this AI to remove offensive and violent content from it suffered from mental health challenges. They were contracted by OpenAI in Kenya and other parts of Africa. And they suffered mental health challenges, and OpenAI didn't help them, and they were very low paid. So these are big issues. And then in terms of appropriate use, there's a couple of assignments here, AI sandwich, which is like use a little bit of AI and then use your own work and put, some combination of that. I also think the cake analogy is a good one for appropriate use. And there's one called the tale of two critiques, like compare a human critique with an AI critique. Prompt engineering, there are so many courses, free courses out there on Coursera, LinkedIn, whatever. What I find fun with how generative AI works is to play the game Quick Draw. I don't know if you've ever played it. I don't think we have time to play it today, but you should try it out. It's a doodling game, and Google created it to understand how people doodle, and it uses pattern recognition. So it's not exactly the same as generative AI, but it's just a neural network type of thing. And you learn how it learns, and you can talk about how it makes choices for things like, for example, a nail. So a nail could be the one that you hit with a hammer, it could be a fingernail, right? And people draw it both ways, so it assumes it understands both. But when you think about something like, for example, drawing a hospital, what's the difference between a hospital and a regular building is, for the most part, people will draw a cross on the hospital. And actually, in the Muslim world, we put a crescent, but it doesn't understand the crescent. It only understands the cross. And that's sort of a reminder that a lot of the data it's getting is from a certain part of the world that uses a cross. And so it assumes that this is what the majority of people do, and that's what to expect, for example. These are the online stories I talked about. In terms of inequalities and biases, there are people who talk about how important it is for AI to be neutral in its intelligence, to be fully representative people, both in the design and the data sets. It hasn't happened yet. I think someone's created one that does that. There's a lot of historical bias, like in image recognition, in criminal justice and employment types of AI. And Ruha Benjamin talks about this as engineered inequality. It's like we're reproducing oppression almost on purpose. And people from the global south need to have more of a say in all of this. That's why we called it a colonizing loudspeaker. We feel like it's just reproducing the dominant knowledge. But there's a paradox of participation, especially indigenous groups talk about. And they say, they want to be represented, but once they give their data to AI, they lose their sovereignty over their data. They call it rhetorical, technological, and data sovereignty. But then if they don't participate, then the space becomes more Western-centric, right? It's it's really difficult dilemma, I think. Do you participate and be part of it, or but then you lose control over what's going to happen with your data, right? But other inequalities, other than the biased data sets being mostly white Western English content, it's inaccessible in some locations. So ChatGPT initially was not available in Egypt, Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia, a few other countries. We had to use like VPN and pretend to have a phone number in some other country to be able to get it. I talked about these kinds of oppression, facial recognition or criminal justice. And it's extractive, right? It learns from people that are using it, and it takes that data without permission. It also, obviously, there's the copyright issue as well, right? Like it's taking someone's work in the first place and learning from it. The issue is now when you try to do very explicit bias with AI, it's been trained to refuse to be biased in those ways, but it has a lot of implicit biases. And you can read about this from these articles. And I've tried it. I've asked it to tell me, I've given it like 5 nationalities, and I said, which one of these is likely to be a terrorist? It'll be like, no, you can't say terrorism by nationality. But then when I tell it, give me a definition of terrorism and 5 examples, the majority of the examples will be from Islamist terrorist groups. So it won't say it explicitly, but if you ask it indirectly, it'll display its biases right away. Another bias related to AI detectors, even. We know they're not reliable, but they're actually more likely to think that a non-native speaker is AI. A non-native speaker is writing because they're really not, maybe not yet a very good writer. They write in formulaic ways. They look more like AI, and the detector will think they were AI. So that's an additional reproduction of bias there. Then the ethical concerns again. I am saying this wolf in sheep's clothing about it's a it's a politically correct AI, but to make it like that, a lot of people were exploited in Kenya for that. The intellectual property rights violations of artists, of people who wrote the material, it doesn't tell you where it got it from. You can't trace it back for the most part, although GPT-4o is starting to do this a little bit, but so far before the 4o, it was not doing that. And then the harm to the climate change, water. Leon First has a really good series about ethics in AI if you want to use that in your classes or if you want to read it up on your own. And then eCampus Ontario have this OER. You click on any of these, this is not live, obviously, this is a screenshot. If you click on any of these, it'll tell you more about the different types of harm AI has done to the environment, to the economy, and to social norms and knowledge production. And some of them are issues with the design and development, and some in operationalization, and some in future legacy. And then in terms of assessing appropriate use, I think it's important to ask ourselves, what's generative AI good for and what is it not good for? So this is time for you guys to share. Yeah, what is generative AI good for in your discipline? I think it's different by discipline, honestly, so I think it's important to ask. I'll put the QR code up again in case you lost it. Can be a de facto conversation partner in language learning. People say this all the time, but I don't think it's very good at Arabic, so it depends on the language. Same with translation, problematic with Arabic as well. Brainstorming, assessing learning. A lot of people say it helps with brainstorming, yeah. Thinking critically about images. Yeah, so let it produce the images and then think. Decorating the cake, creating a launching pad for ideas to grow. Yeah, I agree. Ideation, exploration, assessing learning. I'm curious about that one. Summarizing papers. Yes, I use it a lot for summarizing papers. There are some softwares that are made just for that, like typeset.io, which comes from SciSpace, but you can use it with other ones, sometimes even regular ChatGPT. Help clarify various streams of thought, exploring career options. That's interesting. I haven't tried that one. I'll try it with my daughter. Drafting course outlines and materials, drafting or refining objectives. Honestly, I'm still pretty unsure. That's totally okay. Takes time to figure this out. Can help with writer's block. A lot of people say this, yeah. Determining keywords for search questions. A lot of rhetoric faculty have been using it for that in my institution. Creating a draft abstract from a paper. Yeah, it'll miss something, but it'll be a good start, right? Instead of starting from scratch. Creating outlines and avoiding white paper paralysis for sure. Writing practice questions. Yeah, that was the first thing. My husband's a professor also, and that was the first thing he did. He made it do some surgery questions. Role playing. Yes, it's fun for role playing. There's a couple of people who said that. Possible application correcting OCR transcriptions by historical documents. Yeah. And OCR is AI as well, right? Creating summaries for abstracts, drafting outlines, lit reviews only for certain languages and experts in the field, creating different genres and cultural artifacts. Oh, I don't know about that's an interesting point. To help with resumes and cover letters in initial phases. Yes, I've seen that used in my institution as well for some of the business English or business writing courses that we have. Help students come up with counter arguments. Okay, and some people still unsure. What about what it's bad for? What's it really bad at or bad for? And we don't know how long it's going to be bad at the things it's bad at. And we don't know the limits of what it's good at, but it's interesting to say. It's bad for to use as a search engine. Yeah, I noticed someone use that as one of the metaphors, and I don't think it's a good search engine at all. I mean, Google does use AI, but I mean, generative AI is not good. Sometimes Google is better, right? Writing a whole paper, yeah, it's really bad at that. Although one of my students sent me something that does that recently, but I don't know if it's a good paper, right? Yeah, so I'm seeing hallucinations, misinformation, problems with facts, misrepresenting student skill level in writing. That's definitely an issue. But definitely the fact that it gets a lot of wrong things, the false authority thing is annoying, right? You're saying it's not good at truth, it's not good at facts. And yeah, cover letters and emails generated with AI. Yeah, when students use AI to write an email, it looks like they're lying just because of how formal and beautiful and just perfect it is. It's not human. Learning your voice as a writer. And when learners don't know they have a voice yet, and they use AI, they just lose that entire opportunity. Yeah. The sophisticated writing styles. Okay. It sounds like it's going to be sophisticated, but it's gibberish sometimes. Yeah, no accuracy with the sources. Even the ones that do give you sources don't always give you what's really in the sources in what they're sharing. Citations still inconsistent. I heard there's a good plugin with GPT-4, but I haven't used it. Capturing voice and authenticity, again, that's coming up a lot. Turning instructors into police officers, I think is such a huge issue. Turnitin was already doing that, but AI is making it worse. Students can use lazy and still critical thinking. Yeah. I think for me, the more I let them use it, the more they start to realize its limitations, and then the less the majority of them use it when I ask them not to. There'll be a couple of people who still use it, and then it's really obvious that they use it, and I just make them redo the assignment mostly, and then they don't do that again, for the most part. Sorry, it was too early for the takeaways. All right. Occasional nonsense in translations. Yeah, I agree. And it's so dangerous that that happens sometimes. Harming trust between teachers and students coming up again. Yeah. It leans towards using superlatives. Yeah, this ultimately thing that it uses ultimately is silly. Skips source evaluation stuff. So important, right? I mean, even Google Scholar at least orders them by citation or something. Like you know some information about the quality of a source, and it doesn't do that. But the issue is if people start relying on it, as someone said here, it's not good at analyzing design structures from biomaterials. That's a very specific use, right? I think with maybe middle school kind of information, it's okay. Like my daughter was studying biology yesterday, and her dad's a doctor, and we're asking some questions, but like the multiple choices that she had were not any of the answers that her dad and I were saying like automatically. And so I kept trying to get ChatGPT to tell me one of the answers. Like I'm like, these are the options, you know? But yeah, we were just playing, really. I wouldn't rely on it for something like that. Okay, and so there were people who've talked about, if it's important for the answer to be true, maybe don't use ChatGPT. If it doesn't matter that the answer is true, like you're brainstorming, then fine, go ahead. If it matters that the answer is true, are you an expert to evaluate the truth of it? So maybe we can as academics, but not so much our students, right? And then even if you can verify, are you responsible? Are you going to take full responsibility for anything that gets missed or inaccuracies? And then maybe it's possible to use ChatGPT, but like don't use it. But of course, the safety and the truth is not the only problem, right? So this is a comparison by Shahan Bender of discriminative and generative AI. And discriminative AI is like Google search versus generative AI. And even though generative AI is fast and it's more personalized, there's no transparency over how it reached this, right? And it doesn't rank things properly for you. And yes, it'll interact with you and help you find exactly what you want, but it's not necessarily the correct thing of what you want. So it's important to think about this, how this lack of transparency means we don't even know where this knowledge we're getting is coming from. And it's problem. So I have around 15 minutes, I think, left, if I'm right. Am I right? I think it's 15 minutes. We have time for questions, inshallah. This is a very little like display of some of the images that I think help us understand the prescriptive versus opportunistic use of AI. And this is something John Appolito taught me. Prescriptive versus opportunistic. So prescriptive, like if something has a correct answer, maybe don't use AI for that. Like Google will give you the right answer. Maybe Wikipedia, definitely dig deeper into the peer-reviewed stuff. But opportunistic is when something is in the imagination and there isn't a correct answer. So for example, flags. There's only one correct answer for flags. And for some reason, Stable Diffusion only knows the American flag. But the Egyptian flag definitely doesn't have pink tut on it. That's incorrect. This is not the British flag. It looks like it, but it's not it. The Palestinian, the Kuwaiti flag, they kind of have these colors, but not in that order, not in that look. So that was a very strange thing I discovered. And I kept trying and it would keep doing that, except for the American flag. Always got that one right. Versus, for example, I wanted a picture of a dog carrying a newspaper. I wasn't sure I'd find a Creative Commons image like that. So I did that one with DALL-E. That's an opportunity. Like I could do that. It says pi.com, but it's actually po.com. Fix it later. And also sometimes I'm giving a workshop and I want a particular look. I'll say, let's give you an image of a disruptive classroom with diverse students. So it gave me that. I don't know if it knows that I wear a headscarf, so it gave me a teacher with a headscarf, but it tends to do that a lot. The writing in the back is gibberish. I don't know what language that, it might not be gibberish, but yeah, it tends to write gibberish. There are hands. Someone was talking about hands. Some of these hands have six fingers. I can already see that. But generally, it just gives the impression of a disruptive classroom a little bit. But I think one of the really cool articles about AI is this article about botshit and asking us to be aware of botshit and how to manage the epistemic risks of generative chatbots, and to think about when chatbot generated content is not grounded in truth, it's hallucination, and then we use it uncritically, then this becomes botshit. That's what they're calling botshit. Then we can't use it for communication and decision making. And they're warning us from this, and sort of giving us tasks. Some tasks are easy to verify and some are not. Some tasks are very crucial and some are not very important, like how important is this thing? And so if it's something that's difficult to verify and very important, you have to be really skeptical of what you're asking the chatbot to do. But if it's something that's really an easy task, that's easy to verify, it's not really something important, you can ask the AI to do it and just it's just a different way of using the chatbot, right? And I think that's why we need to use it enough to be able to make that judgment, but someone has to have the judgment of that they know that this is correct or not, or the possibility of it being incorrect and being able to read between the lines, right? The crafting effective prompts part, I'm going to skip over all that. But these are just different AI tools. And I think a lot of the research tools are not bad, but sometimes Google Scholar is better at finding the right tools, but maybe you can use it for other stuff. So sort of the question of what do we do as educators, I think a culture of transparent assessment is a good starting point to just ask students if they use AI to let us know how they've used it and where they've used it. But it's totally okay to also say it's not good for you to use AI in this way. Let's try it and see if you actually like it. And do you prefer your own writing voice, like if they write by hand and then compare to what a chat GPT would do and say, I actually enjoy your own writing better, because students may not realize that. Or maybe if they see each other's and start to feel it, like it's good for them to experience something to be able to know the limitations of it, I think. And Sarah Elaine Eaton says eventually we won't know where the human ends and the AI begins, but and she thinks our definitions of plagiarism will be transcended. But I think for now we still need to reference things. I think it's important to reach students in the things that they care about, make sure that what we do is relevant to them, that we allow space for them to do research and writing about things that they care about so that they want to do it and then they don't want to take the shortcuts, Here's some inspiration for assignments to promote critical AI literacy from all these different places, their books, their websites, their collected. Most of them are collections by people from all over the world, so you can use them on the slides. And I also just wanted to plug, in the intro, JC mentioned Equity Unbound and MyFest. These are 3 months of learning together in whatever way you want, so you can pop in and out. They're like maybe 5 events a week scattered throughout the week. So it's not like a conference over 2 days or something. So you can take your time. There's a lot of stuff related to AI, but also a lot of stuff related to well-being and joy and community building and all sorts of things. And even things for you if you have children and or even parents who want to join in and do some fun stuff. So yeah, I did share my slides early on. Let me see if the link is, yeah, the link is earlier, but I'll put it at the end again, Tonya.
And we'll share the
And I
link
just
as
wanted,
well.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. And then I just wanted to know what's a key takeaway for everybody. So I'm gonna move to that question on Mentimeter and give you time to tell me your key takeaways, and then I'll be ready to take questions. I know it's not a lot of time left, but you can always contact me later. So this is again the QR code for the slides and the link, and my email, my Twitter, I think is there too. Yeah, and the QR code for the slides. Okay. Okay, so people are happy with the resources, it's transparent assessment, groundless work and care. Yeah. So like the last three slides, basically, exciting opportunities that urgent need to retool our teaching, resources out there to help navigate. Yes. Paradox of participation. Yeah, I'm very happy with this term too. I was very happy when I found it. I was writing something about racism and AI, and I read a few papers and that term really stood out to me. JC, how do you want me to take questions? I think I have on a Mentimeter a slide for questions, but if there are people, like if we want to take one virtual and one in-person question, I'm happy to do that.
Sure. And are you able to hear me from here?
Yes, very well.
Okay, yeah. So, audience members, is there anyone who has a burning question?
Can you hear me, Maha?
Sort of.
You might have to come a little bit
Come
closer.
closer, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's a question from Rebecca, which I'll come back to.
Oh, it's
After.
mine. It's me. My question is, do you have any ideas for how to get students to think critically about the tension between the positive of using AI to brainstorm and the interruption that AI can pose in thinking through your ideas on a problem in an intentionally messy first draft?
Yeah, I think they need to experience a positive space of having a writer's block and trying to brainstorm on their own and seeing that that could work, and then also experience a time where something like AI would stop them. So I would maybe split the class in two, and for one paper, let them brainstorm with AI first and then start working, and then the other class brainstorm on their own first and then check what AI brings out. And then go back and see if they came up with things that the AI didn't come up with. It might help if you sort of scaffold the brainstorming. So if you just tell someone, okay, go brainstorm, it's something. But if you sort of give them some prompts to help them brainstorm. So for example, like what I do with metaphors with my students, it helps me know what they're thinking about AI better than if I tell them, so do you like AI? Do you think AI is good for you? But if they say like, I think AI is like a genie, so they feel like it. When I ask them, do you mean that it meets your wishes or it misunderstands your wishes? Because a genie can be doing either. So I think if we help students with the brainstorming and then we let them compare, I mean, a lot of times my students come out of the class and they say, oh, AI is really bad at some things, you know? And I've also had students have very different attitudes about whether AI does help them with learning or not. And we need to, I think, be aware that some of our students have maybe ADHD and they do have difficulty getting started and it might help them more than others. Other people might have difficulty asking for help, and so asking AI might be easier for them for certain things. So we have to think about all of that, and also this non-native speaker thing, just needing something to write it in correct English. If they feel like that's so valued and they get penalized for not writing correct English more than for expressing themselves, we need to also like let them know we appreciate their real thoughts and opinions, for example, versus um, they think a lot of times that we need a formulaic 5-paragraph essay that sounds very formal versus something that sounds warm and deep and real. And I think eventually some students will figure out how to make the AI sound warm and deep. And I think there's actually this paraphrasing tool that humanizes AI written work. So there's all that going on. But I think, and the other thing is, I think honestly, a lot of times I'm asking my students to write about something that was a very personal experience, and there's no way that AI is going to do that. But we have the personal experience ourselves. Like we go out and plant things in a garden, or we go out and teach kids in a school nearby. So how's AI going to write that for them? How's AI going to even get them started? But sometimes I let them interview each other on something. They take notes and then they let the AI write it up for them, and then they reflect on whether they're happy with it. And a lot of times they're like, I don't like the way AI wrote this. I'll write it myself. So I think, but not all of them will reach that conclusion. I think sort of what you're trying to say, you want them all to reach the same conclusion, maybe, but I think they won't. But the question of letting them do it critically is important. I read recently about a history professor who used AI to let their students do more research by letting them use AI to create scenarios, and then they have to research every fact in the scenarios, which I think is probably more work than if you ask them to research this some other way. Then they had to like check everything that the AI came up with and decide whether it's accurate historically and get the right sources and get primary sources and stuff like that. Does that help, Rebecca? Okay, thank you.
Let's see, we have other questions in the chat. All right, so for those on Zoom, does anyone have a question? Yeah, I'm not seeing a question in chat. We can wait a couple more seconds. Maha, would you like to take another question from the audience? If we
Sure,
don't have anyone from chat or
sure. And I
virtually?
also put it on Mentimeter.
Okay.
If someone comes up with more questions, they might, that might appear here.
Yeah, so we have 1 more minute and time for one more question.
I've made them talk so much already. They're outtalked. How do you stay abreast of developments? I got that question online, okay?
Okay.
So it's over here. That is a really good question. So first of all, there's this AI in education mailing list that Rebecca, Lee, and I are on. And there's one in AI in writing. So if you teach writing, then that's a place to stay abreast. And so what happens is there's a lot of people there who will just be posting articles or asking questions. Like one recent question that was really important, I'm on the IRB board, and I hadn't thought about use of AI in research and how we should have guidelines for that. And I don't think the NIH have given guidelines yet, or maybe I don't know. But we had a discussion about this, and then I went to our IRB board like, hey, we need to have a discussion about this. So these are things that happen. In my department, we're Center for Learning and Teaching, so it's our job to support other people. So we need to be abreast, but we also have our AI ambassadors. So we have from like 4 or 5 departments. Thank you, Caroline, for putting the link. We have professors from different departments who are interested in AI, and they update us, and they update their colleagues for things that are relevant to their discipline. And so I learn a lot from them as well, like, because there are things like, I'm not going to go into figuring out how people are using AI in history like every day, but if I have someone in history who's always keeping me updated, then I'll know. And obviously I research it and I teach it, so I end up obviously just doing it for my own research and writing. But I think the regular person, just surround yourself, I think, with people on social media or in like figure out who the people are in your university who are updated with this and keep talking to them. You will always not be updated enough. Like accept that, be okay with it. It's okay that there are some AI tools that we don't know. We keep being asked to tell people about all the tools, and they're like, the tools are going to change. Some of them will disappear, new ones will come up. Ones that used to do something are now not doing it. Ones that are free are no longer free. It's really difficult to keep up. But yeah, it has to be a network of people. I don't think any one person could do it alone, to be honest. So I've been teaching everyone in my department, and then the ones who want to take it up are becoming like more specialized with visual AIs, and others are figuring out how to use it to make videos and things like that. So I hope that helps. Figure out what's easier for you and all of the options I've given you, because some people are not into like Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff, so that might not be your cup of tea. Some people don't want email, but definitely join us in MyFest, because over the summertime, June, July, August, you'll have a lot of people sharing the latest that they're doing with AI, and you can pick and choose the sessions that you want from there. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here. Can we all give Maha Bali a round of applause? Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. I've just discovered recently how to celebrate on Zoom. So let's see if you can you guys do that? Yeah, I like it. Thank you all so much. I do hope I'll see some of you with us in my fest. There's a lot of pricing options, and we can give like a special discount code to the university if you're interested. Just let me know.
Great. We'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.